pass the floor to my colleague Ursula, who is gonna moderate the report back and the panel with experts and with you to build the recommendations from this session. So Ursula, thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. So again, I think we had a series of very compressed in time but rich discussions in breakout rooms. So let's hear from my colleagues what happened there. Again, trying to focus on the three most important successful solutions and suggestions how to make them happen in policies. And I believe this time it's actually Enrique who was in the first group or the fourth group. So you start.
Yes, so we had very interesting and very detailed presentations, and I will encourage everyone to look at them in the next days. I mean, you will receive an email. They will be uploaded on the website about examples how to coordinate funds at, in this case, was federal level in Germany, then as well regional level in Finland. In addition to the example we saw from Catalonia linked to the Catalonian Rural Vision. What stood out, and it was basically three main areas, three main aspects or features that need to be in place in order for the coordination to happen. The first one is in all the cases, everything starts with a strategy. So they all have some sort of strategic framework that is transversal, that encompasses, that is not developed just in the context of one specific fund, but looks at the territories itself and all the challenges. And then on the basis of that strategy, it develops the right governance structures that actually allows to bring all these funds to work together. And the third important element is once you have these things, that you develop specific tools that help you to manage that governance system, to enable communication, etc. So regarding the strategy, there were solutions named basically saying that the European Commission should lead by example. And here I mean, we were going very fast. This is the scope of a lab is, you know, to send our wishes. And there was this proposal that we should start at European level, probably in the next college, try to advocate for a new way of structuring the Commission to break with the existing silos and make it a new structure more linked to the territorial approach. With that, you can move then in the member states and trigger changes in the member states that allowed action. Also at EU level, there was an important call to bring back the EFRD to the Commons Provision Regulation, because that was seen as something happening really coordination in the regions and the member states. Another idea that came out and that came from the example from Catalonia, that they have created a specific group within the regional parliament. Perhaps in Europe there could be, as well as there's going to be new elections and a new parliament in place, perhaps they could think of creating a specific committee or group that talks and discuss things in rural areas, and that can link up with all the European funds, not only with the CP. In terms of governance, what it seems something or an approach that works is to have one committee where you can talk with or bring representatives from all the funds. The case in Germany is they have this specific ministry that is dealing with EU funds and regional development, and within that ministry is where they manage all the monitoring committees of all the funds, except EFRD, where they bring expertise. And then in terms of tools, one important one, and actually that's probably the one that matters the most, is that all this coordination needs to happen not because of the sake of simplifying life of those involved in them, but to simplify the life of the final beneficiaries who absolutely don't care about how you structure your things, They want to know where they can get support and how they can get it in an easy way. So the tool here remains mostly about having improved the communication of where are the opportunities that people can access. And the German case, in a sense, showed that when you have all within the same, let's say, roof, all the funds within the same roofs, or territorial funds within the same roof, you can streamline communication much better than having different channels in different public administrations. I think I stopped there. I think those were the major points coming out from our discussion.
Okay, great. Many thanks, Enrique. And then Pascal from group number 5.
Yes, thank you, Ursula. So our group was on strengthening territorial development tools, so also very interesting exchange. So we have tried visually to summarize in 3 points. So the first thing, so mainly the participants had experience on CLLD and LEADER, so not other integrated instruments, but we can say that concretely there is no real need to develop new instruments, new territorial instruments, but to reinforce them based on reinforced mutual trust between the different stakeholders involved. From one side, let's say the administrations, and the other side, the local actors, the implementers of the rural development. So this is important. In that context, it has been reminded that the leader added value is higher than the cost it occurs, but there is a difficulty to measure concretely or quantitatively the impact of leader as another, let's say, mono-funding of mono-sector instrument or policy, meaning that the rural proofing, which is recognized as needed to build this trust, this mutual trust, has to be adapted. And so one proposal that has been made is to develop further sharing good practices, projects, stories, which are more qualitative, but which demonstrate, I would say, how an integrated instrument like LEADER brings added value for the local actors and on the ground. So this is one key outcome. The other point is something that has been already mentioned this morning, but that we need more harmonized rules between the different policies involved when we are talking about integrated development, but there are some limitations for policies. I mean, all the, I would say, the policies, but also actors on the ground cannot apply those harmonized rules at the same way. So take that into account. And the last point, which is an important point based also on the presentation of the European toolkits from this morning, among which the Future World Toolkit. It's important also that those kind of toolkits are used by the actors, but also to be translated at local level in a sort of complementary way I would say, to apply those tools to make more accessible those kind of tools for local actors, either in terms of accessing funding, but also in terms of other issues that you have mentioned this morning in terms of support for managing projects.
Okay, great. Many thanks, Pascal. And then Patricia, very quickly.
Yes, thanks, Ursula. Very quickly, how to mobilize and combine different funds. We spoke a lot about the hybrid public-private partnership for accessing the funding, and we have the presentation of the particular case of this cooperative bank that is partnering with many other institutions at EU, national, regional level to leverage different fundings for the clients, and also the matchmaking platform that was presented by Mauricio earlier today. And then we also hear about this campaign that raised money by the flags, so the fishery local action groups in Finland, and that managed to make some money out of this campaign to fund small-scale projects, ideas, and different actions for the fishers. And how this can work? Well, first we spoke a lot that we need to create a local supportive ecosystem, and this includes to do some preparatory stages to ensure that all that available money, because actually there are a lot of available money, but it needs to reach those that need it. And for this, we need to start, for instance, by making visible all the different kind of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is very different for a small to bigger entrepreneur startups. They need to receive the guidance to the different models so that we make sure that they are accessing the right tool and the right funding. And this is especially relevant for small entrepreneurs. They are not very visible for the private investors. So we need to change the culture of this risk dilemma. We've been speaking a lot again about risk, especially for small entrepreneurs, for farmers, for youngsters. And this requires a lot of mediation, and not only with the financial institutions and the policymakers, but also with other actors. For instance, we spoke about the media, that they can influence who is accessing the funding and to change the narrative about the risk that is associated to funding, for instance, young entrepreneurs. We also spoke a lot about capacity building. So the loans that are coming from the banks, they need to be complemented with other actions, with grants, with capacity building for the clients that most of the time are entrepreneurs, startups. And for instance, in the example of the cooperative bank in Greece, they said how they are supporting 360 approach to the client. So it's not only to make the money accessible, but also to support how to manage this. And this includes, for instance, developing together the business plan. And last point, very important, is that even with all these support mechanisms, there's still a lot of entrepreneurs that might not be able to access the funding because they are not meeting the criteria. And here it's very important then the piloting, the experimentation, funding, innovation in small scale. So leveraging some small-scale funding, and once the idea has been piloted, has been validated, especially when these ideas are bringing different actors collectively, they proved the added value with this pilot, this perhaps small loan coming from the local action group. And with this validation, they might be able to then meet the criteria that sometimes is very difficult for small-scale projects or for small entrepreneurs. And after this experimentation, they might be able to access other type of funding opportunities.
Great. Okay. Thanks a lot, Patricia. Very good. So you've seen that, again, we try to bring together the different elements of improving policies, improving the flow of different sources of funding in different ways to the rural areas. And again, we have a panel of three, this time mainly experts, stakeholders and experts, who can share their thoughts about that discussion so far and how this can be translated into practical policies, practical action supported by policies. So for that panel, I would like to invite Marine Goudron from the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, Pedro Fernandez from the Leader Network of Andalusia, and Maura Farrell from the University of Galway in Ireland. We have our three panelists. Yes, so thank you very much for agreeing to be with us. And again, I would probably invite your comments. You've heard before, so like, what do you think about these solutions that have been suggested? What do you think? Are they realistic, or some of them at least? And to what extent we can bring them forward in practical terms to make them turn into policies. And as before, our colleague Julie is taking notes on the Miro board, so we'll be able to see at the end the outcomes. But of course, in the meantime, we will be inviting also participants from the audience to share their thoughts or to ask questions. So perhaps we will start with this: what do you think about these solutions? Are they responding to the needs? Are they realistic? Marine, if you want to be the first one to respond.
Okay, thank you very much. And it was really interesting discussions and all the presentations. So on this issue of coordination of at both policy level and coordination of the funds. And I liked the way Enrique presented it between the strategy, the governance, and the tools. Indeed, when it comes to strategy and governance, basically it has to be, and several of us has repeated it, place-based. There is no one size fits all. You have to start from the local needs, and that's where we find this difficulty, and that's why we need to combine different funds, because the funds that are designed at the EU level, they are designed according to European level policies, but they are not matching the very local needs for a municipality. And that's where it's necessary for a municipality who thinks necessarily in an integrated way to try to start from its own needs. What is my goal as a mayor? What kind of policy investments do I want for my community? And then look at the different fundings available. And when it comes to coordination and governance, coordination is a multi-level governance in practice. And that's where you need to institutionalize coordination mechanisms at all levels. You need cooperation between municipalities in a functional rural area to pool your resources, to pool your ambitions. You also need coordination at the intermediate and regional level. And of course, you need cooperation and coordination at national level. There was someone who mentioned in the chat that it has to go beyond the individual. In practice, we see that sometimes you have very good cooperation and coordination mechanisms because you have one individual who is willing to do so. But you need it to be institutionalized. You need mechanisms at all levels of institutions so that if this one good willing person leaves, the mechanism and the culture of cooperation and coordination will remain. I will stop here for now.
Okay, thank you. You'll get another chance, of course, later. Pedro, from your perspective as a leader, because Marine was talking very much about municipalities, and then.
Hello, good afternoon again. I have heard a lot of interesting things along the morning. I am only going to talk a little bit because almost it hasn't seen yet. I think the most important thing is we need that public administration trust in this way of work of leader of local action group. For me, is the most important. In Spain, we have different experience, different regions. In each region, if they trust in leader in local action group, leaders runs very fast and work and execute all the funds very quickly and very good. In other regions that they don't trust in leader, things doesn't work. For example, in Spain, we have region with 25% of the budget dedicated to leader. In other, we have only 5%. And if they can reduce to zero, I know it. So that's the first thing. We need trust of the public administration in this way of work. Of course, we also need coordination with different levels of administration. In Spain, in Andalusia, in our region, we don't have multi-funds because we don't have the software to do the cross control like in Finland. For that reason, it's impossible to have multi-fund in Spain. It's a pity, but the way we do it a long time ago in 2000, 2006 was by calling by phone to the colleagues, asking for a project for entrepreneurs, but that's not the way to work. In resume, that's all. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks a lot. But I think this idea about from 2006, the idea of just taking a phone and cooperating, that is already a way of coordination, a practical one. So it's just not, let's not disregard that. I appreciate what you said and also what was said earlier.
Yes, but auditors don't like this way of control with the phone. They prefer the software instrument.
No, of course. Okay, and then Nora, from your perspective.
Yes, and thank you, Ursula. And again, I suppose we've heard some super examples throughout the day and throughout the conference, and I think those examples are what we need, I suppose, to build on. But there are those examples right across every community in every country across Europe. And I think, again, I think, Maureen, you said this idea of place-based. So many of these examples work absolutely within their own context, within their own country, within their own community. But I think changing those, scaling up those, scaling out those, transferring them to other communities means that we have to have a simplified system. And I think this is sometimes where we fall down. The simplification of the system can be hugely difficult. So you have a new entrepreneur, and I think we talked about it in the group that we had. You have a young entrepreneur who may have huge difficulty in accessing credit. And the simplification of that system can be his stopping gap to actually going forward into becoming one of those entrepreneurs that we need in that rural community. Women, for example, it has been documented that there's huge issues on women accessing those funds that are available within those areas. So simplifying those actions for, I suppose, funds that be a national fund or European fund really, really matters. So what happens in one community may not be exactly what happens in another, but across the board, simplifying the access to that, I think, is hugely important. I think collaboration of what's going on already is also something for me that's really important. And I think what happens, I suppose, for example, if we take the local action groups and the leader projects and the leader funding, it's absolutely essential and imperative for every rural community. But what's happening in many countries at the moment, some of that work is being, I suppose, carried out under different government bodies, under different areas. So we're doubling up on work instead of coming together and finding out how we can collaborate for, I suppose, the betterment of the rural community, for the entrepreneur, for the advancement of that community, irrespective of what area it's in, whether it's sustainable action, of an economic action, a social enterprise, an environmental action. In some respects, collaborating with all of those groups, with all of those funds that are actually already in place in many respects. But the collaboration means sometimes they're actually fighting against each other for community groups to come forward. So I think those collaboration of funds, of programs, of projects that are already there is absolutely essential, that we're not doing the same job and coming up with different results in different jobs. Focusing on youth, I think we're often looking at paving funding for community groups, for entrepreneurs, and sometimes we forget about the young people that have huge difficulties in actually accessing funds right from the word go. They may not have credit facilities, they may not have platforms, they may not have, in some ways, I suppose, that visibility that allows them to access funds. So we really need to consider the issues that young people face before they ever try to put themselves on that platform as an entrepreneur, and overcoming those issues that young people have and simplifying I suppose, the paving of the way for that young person, because often it can be that young person that creates a huge community spin-off industry, a huge community impact. But we need to simplify the path for that young person in order to make that difference within that community.
Okay, that brings us together back to the discussion we had before lunch, actually, about simplification as a kind of cross-cutting point that is actually needed also at the policy-making level to bring the different sources of funding to rural areas. Okay, I would just very quickly jump to the last question to you before we give floor to the audience, because we have to we are compressed for time, which is how to make it happen in practice. So what are the practical steps we can take, coming from your discussion and your experience, to make those ideas that we all agree about, the simplification, the collaboration, the coordination, working together, how in practice can this happen? I would just give Pedro maybe the first opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. Two ideas. Perhaps we can offer to make a rural pact at national level. We know that we have a rural pact at European level. Perhaps we need to sign a rural pact at national or regional level in order to reinforce the model of work like leader. Another thing, I think the rules for leader are not appropriate. The regulation of the agriculture fund is not fixed with rural development with leader. I think it's a very big code for leader. I don't know if I have explained very well. Thank you.
Yes, I think this is something that has been coming up and up in the different discussions. Of course, this simplification and adapted rules for leader, which are not the same rules as the other sources of funding, obviously. Okay, and then Marine, what you're proposing to? Okay,
so I have two maybe more concrete proposal and one dream proposal. So first, the two more concrete one, and something I was thinking as Pedro was explaining some technical difficulties, that you could use technical assistance and dedicate part of the technical assistance to building your capacities for multi-funding, to make sure you have the tools, whether it is IT, or to make sure you have the institutional settings that will allow you to do multi-funding, because it's possible. The proof is many of you showed good examples today. It's possible. So why we still have gaps? I think through dedicated use of technical assistance, we could maybe lift these barriers. Another maybe more concrete proposal, but aligned, would be to have, I think the national government should audit the different rules that apply at the local level. Because again, maybe you don't have all the understanding, and someone mentioned that very different EU funds. I think it's important that someone has a very clear picture of all the different rules that applies at the local level. The audit will be the first step to simplification. And then coming to maybe, I would say not immediately achievable proposal, but as we mentioned, the fact that the EAFRD is now under CIP and not with cohesion fund is creating maybe unnecessary administrative burden. And the whole question about why do we need to combine funds in the first place is because there is no one fund that allows you to answer your needs. So maybe we can just completely rethink the architecture of EU funds into a much more simplified funds, to maybe one fund that would be dedicated to municipalities, cities, another fund for SMEs. So I think there are maybe revolutionary ways of thinking the architecture of fund, or maybe more realistic in the short term to have much more flexibility in investment priorities that are decided at national level to make sure they answer the need at the local level.
Great. I think Enrique already said earlier, this is a policy lab. We are free to experiment with all kinds of ideas, even the most, let's say, apparently unrealistic. So thank you very much for coming up with these suggestions. And then Maura?
Thank you. I think maybe starting with capacity building assistance first before we get to the funding stage. I think offering training and support for rural communities, you know, providing resources to those rural communities, I suppose, to navigate the systems that are there, to navigate the applications, to navigate what's actually required of them. I think that's actually needed first before we get to the funding stages. And again, the funding, I think sometimes we need to kind of think about a unified rural fund rather than all of this, you know, single funding that's going on all over the place. I think, you know, consolidating the funding so people or communities can apply for, I suppose, a block of funding in some ways, blocking out grants that maybe local authorities might hold on to, but then communities could apply for maybe block grants and then allow them. And I had a student from the US a number of years ago, and a lot of this is done in the States where they would provide these large block grants for communities. And then it is within the communities to allocate the funding to various local needs, rather than it being centrally given out or you applying on several allocations. So I suppose the way in which they would do it is this block funding would be provided to a community, and then the community would decide how the money is divided within their community. It creates, I suppose, specific areas or communities that get larger amounts of funding, but then they become quite good examples of how the funding can be used to improve a whole community. So again, I think that idea of block funding or block grants, I think to me is quite interesting. Capacity building assistance. I think also, I think really flexible funding models. We've got to gain flexibility and how people can gain access to funding, how they can allocate funding, overcoming that huge burden of, I suppose, and again, Pedro might have even spoken it in and around the leader and the leader funding, allowing communities, I suppose, to overcome that, I suppose, administrative burden that can actually be associated with funding pathways. Great,
great. In the early days of LEADER, I think this was called the global grants. We were talking about global grants under yes. way back in the beginning of LEADER, and that's, I think, interesting to come back to that idea. Yeah. Great. Okay. I would like then to invite people from the audience to make further suggestions, practical ideas, how we can bring this up. I see Enrique has already raised his hand. Is it from the chat or is it from your own question? Anyway, go ahead, Enrique.
Yes, no, I would like to really encourage people to raise their hands, as I did myself. And I see in the chat you have reacted quite, some of you, to different ideas when we were talking about the rural funding. So I just pick you as a victim to break the ice, and hopefully others will follow. So I just give the floor to Anke to elaborate a bit on her point. And also perhaps afterwards Mauricio Bryan, who I don't know how connected the two might be, but it might be good to elaborate a little bit on those ideas. And then please, the others raise the hand and come in as well with your additional recommendations.
Indeed, thanks a lot, Enrique. So Anke first, and then Mauricio. Maybe we can spotlight the two of them and see if they enter into a dialogue.
Yeah, thank you very much that I can have the floor again. I think what was coming from Galway is really what we have in mind in Germany as well. That one one fund for or a common fund for rural development coming from the different DGs would be perfect, because then we have the possibility maybe to have one rule. And I think this is the only possibility for implementing the multi-fund approach really successfully. This is what came. We had a meeting from all the local actor groups last week, and this is what their opinion is as well in Germany. So maybe we should. Well, we go for that, I think. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then Mauricio, this
Okay.
something to do with the Rural Pact funding pipeline.
Yes. It was one of the words that
Challenging.
one of the mentions that Isabel Bombal did at the very beginning of the morning. She said, strong statement on optimizing EU funds, optimizing them. With who? With the citizenship. Somehow we make them participatory in the decision making. The crowdfunding brings in a very valuable tool that you're engaging with your community, you're participating with them, but you're giving them voice. Not just to the promoters of the project, but the citizenship that is participating by supporting them. The result on one of the cases that I mentioned on the Catalan case, it's one of many in which we see that public funds come in. Okay, those 24 grand that they put that all the entities, this consortium of LAGs, small municipalities, and leader funds came through for communication, dissemination of the project. It's one thing, but it was 24, but on the first case, it went beyond almost three times the amount of money that they put. On the second edition, it went beyond that. 24 all of a sudden became 100,000 euros for those 6 projects. So this is where that citizenship participation in the rural is crucial. Finding the ways to make them help. Why not thinking about would a neighbor invest in a energy community? Would they lend me money? Of course they would. If you give them a chance and a tool and whereby and how, security, you're trustworthy.
Yeah. So if we combine those two ideas, a single rural fund, but with this community focus or community management, I don't know how to do that. And I see Luis and Joe also with 2 hands raised, and I think that would be it for the sort of, let's say, this discussion contribution session. Luis, if you unmute yourself, it would be better. We cannot hear you. Maybe you have your headsets plugged in, or
yeah.
Oh, now it's good.
Now
it's good.
Oh, yeah, because I wasn't muted. Yeah, Maurice was talking about communities of energy, and I would talk about the energy of the communities. Yeah, maybe if you have what you mentioned before, because you already had that one single basket with several funds in the beginning of Leader, and what in fact is what local action groups are claiming to since the Tartu Declaration, and in that case, maybe communities and LEGs could orient their energy to find other sourcing funds, because now they are putting all the efforts to undertake all the bureaucracy with this combination of funds to finance projects and strategies. And I don't know if this is possible, but if we propose this, we are not being very, very brave. We could be braver than this, I think, and could be a little bit more irreverent, keeping our keeping more based in our experience at local level, which is being very difficult to cope all these regulations and difference and so on. And if someone helps from the upper levels, we could orient our energy to find other, I would say, I was very impressed with this idea of a more organized crowdfunding and other sources of funding. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. And then Joe?
Mine's very quick. I think if you want crowdfunding to work, you have to understand participation in a different way. So participation at the moment is still thought of as like urban planners. I have an idea, but I'll talk to the neighbors to see if they like it. So I think you have to then really understand what it means to have a democratic and decentralized process that actually enables people to form networks that are resilient to use the tools that are available to them, because they're creating the tools and they're using the tools. It's not just a process of we came up with a plan and now we consult people to see if they want to use it. That's it.
Okay, great. Very concise, and that's all coming into the same like basket of ideas that fit together. I don't know, Julie, if you would be willing to share what we have managed to take note of until now, if you're okay to do that very briefly, and then we try to wrap it up and maybe give the last a few comments to our panelists.
Yes.
Just show us what we have. I know it's extremely difficult. The ideas are coming very fast, and also at the same time in the chat and in orally. So
do you want me to comment very quickly, or?
Yeah, I think we can see that this is very much about this idea of place-based and leader-oriented community support, support and tailor-made. And then there's a lot of things about the funding system being simplified in global grants and using technical assistance. And yeah, it's actually not even simplified, this idea of auditing the local rules. Not the tools, actually, by the way, Julie. I think it's meant to be rules. So audit the rules with which the local communities have to comply with in order to get the funding. I think that was the idea, and I think it was very, very important. Okay. Tailor-made solutions again, and of course the Rural Pact, making the Rural Pact happen. This is just music to our ears in the Rural Pact Support Office, of course, and I would imagine that in DG Agri as well. We are very much hoping that this is what is going to happen shortly, and we need a concerted effort of all the actors. It's not just for the managing authorities. And I love your images, Judy, about work in progress. We are all working on this, and we will continue working on this. Thanks a lot. Have I missed something important that I did not say, Judy, or that you would still like to highlight? Or
no, I think it's fine.
Okay, great. Last word to every panelist. Maybe, I don't know, Maura, you go first this time. But it's better if you unmute yourself.
Yes, I think, some of the examples, I think it's always examples. Examples trigger innovations, they trigger ideas, they trigger empowering people. And I think keep bringing these examples forward, connecting these examples now with the Rural Pact. I suppose having that bravery to think outside the box, and not just to us as researchers, policymakers, Rural Pact, I suppose, enthusiasts, but also I think community groups having, I think, that sense of empowerment, that sense of innovation, and that sense of thinking outside the box. And I think it really will, irrespective of paving the way to funding, they will find funding, they will find access to what they need if they have, I suppose, that belief in themselves and belief in the system.
Okay, and then Pedro. Thanks a lot.
Yes, I want to say that it's a shame that the Spanish regional public administration are not here learning from the good practice and recommendation that you have presented. I don't understand why in this kind of events they are not here listening, learning what we have to do to improve new politician, new leader, and try to do the things better. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thanks. Time will come also for the Christmas wishes. Thanks. Great. And Marine?
So just to say that I think this policy lab has been extremely useful. As Maura said, it's really interesting to hear what's possible in different parts of Europe, because we all have different national contexts, different legislations applying, but seeing that, okay, maybe it's just a question of rules and maybe we can change those rules to make whatever we want. It's really useful and very timely, because I think we already, it's very early, but we're already thinking about next programming period. So I really eager to see the final results of this webinar, because it has been extremely interesting.
Okay, thank you very much. There's nothing to add to that from my side. I just say, I don't want to repeat, because you have actually done already a condensation, these last comments and Julie's graphs of what we have come up with. Just to say, because so many of you are mentioning examples and that we need more examples. We in the Rural Pact, we are trying to collect different examples, and not just from the ground, but also like we call methodological examples of methods that are working in one place, and we hope to disseminate them to be taken up in other places. And I think Vanetta has just shared in the chat the link to what we have so far from our good practices, which is only good practices for year one so far, but there will be more coming, and we also rely on you to provide us with the good practices. And we hope that we can use some of the examples from this presented in this policy lab as good practice examples on our website. With that, I think we have to move forward. So I will then pass on to Enrique, who will chair the final session.